Welcome to Whispers of Ink. I'm Machado de Assis, and now I will read one of my stories.
Let's start with the book Virginia, which is part of my novels collection. Chapter 1. Narrative of a Lawyer. My St. John's Day in 1885 did not pass peacefully 2 full weeks before the church. Honors the evangelist. One received a strange note by mail. It had no signature and the handwriting was unfamiliar to me. The doctor is invited to travel to a certain town to take charge of a legal case. The matter is worthy of the lawyer's talent and skills. Expenses and fees will be paid in advance the moment he sets foot in the saddle. The accused is already in jail in that same town, and his name is Julian. Please note that the doctor is asked to defend the defendant. I read and reread the letter. I turned it over again and again. I compared the handwriting with every sample I had from my friends and acquaintances. I found nothing. Still, curiosity began to grow inside me. Through that mysterious message, I sensed the start of an unusual story. So I made up my mind. I wrapped up some business and dropped others completely. 8 days after receiving the note, I had a horse and a guide waiting at my door for the journey. Just as I was about to leave, a stranger entered my home and handed me a roll of banknotes. It was a large sum, clearly meant to cover expenses and payment for my services. Despite his strong insistence, I refused the money, climbed onto my horse, and rode off. Only after traveling several miles did I remember that my old friend lived in that very town, a former classmate from law school. He had left Rio de Janeiro 8 years earlier to devote himself fully to farming, as poetic language might say. A few days later, I arrived at my friend's house. After handing my horse to my guide, I walked inside to greet my former study partner. He welcomed me with joy and surprise. Once we calmed down a bit, he introduced me to his family, his wife, and their little daughter. The girl looked just like her mother, and the mother looked like she had stepped out of a painting of angels. As for the reason behind my visit, I only explained it all after he brought me into the warmest room in the house, where a cup of rich, hot coffee soon joined us. The weather was cold. I remember it was June. I wrapped myself in my coat, and with every sip of coffee I gave a new piece of the story. "Why are you here? Why have you come?" he asked me. "You'll find out soon enough. I think there's a mystery to solve." 15 days ago, I received an anonymous note at my office in the capital. It urged me to come to this town to take on a case. I couldn't recognize the handwriting. It was uneven and shaky, like it had been written by a tired hand. "Do you still have the letter with you?" "I do." I took the mysterious note from my pocket and handed it open to my friend. After reading it, he said, "It's Pai de Todos' handwriting." "Who is Pai de Todos?" "Has a local landowner around here, an old man named Pio. The people call him father of all because in truth he really is everyone's father." I knew there had to be something unusual behind this. What does this old man do that gives him such a title? Not much, really. Pio is, in a way, justice and charity rolled into one. Only the biggest cases go to the official courts or authorities, but everything else, small disputes, personal matters, is brought to Pio's farm and settled by him. Everyone respects his decisions and follows them without question. Whether it's against Pedro or Paulo, both accept his judgment as if it came straight from God. When two rivals leave Pio's farm, they leave as friends. To disagree with Pai de Todos feels like going against your own conscience. So he acts like a judge. But how does he act as a charitable man? Pio's farm is a refuge for orphans and the poor. There, you'll find everything needed for life. Milk and education for the children, bread and peace for adults. Many farmers within these 6 miles grew up and got their start in life thanks to Pio's farm. As both Solomon and St. Vincent de Paul in one. I drank the last drop of coffee and looked at my friend with disbelief in my eyes. "Is all this true?" I asked. "Then you doubt me?" I just hate having to travel so many leagues from the capital, where the story would find nothing but disbelief. Only to come to this corner of the world and find something that should be common everywhere. Put aside those philosophical thoughts. Pio isn't a myth, has a real man, flesh and blood. He lives like we do, has 2 eyes, just like you and me. Then this letter is from him. The handwriting is his. Is the farm close? My friend led me to the window. "It's about a quarter of a league from here," he said. "Look, it's behind that hill." Just then, a black man on a mule passed below the window. 2 large baskets bounced on the animal's back. My friend leaned out and asked the man, "Is your master home?" "He is, sir, but is about to leave." The man rode on, and we stepped back from the window. "Is he Pio's slave?" "We call them slaves, but Pio doesn't own slaves, he has friends. Everyone sees him almost as a god. There's never been anywhere such gentle and kind treatment toward enslaved people. None of those cruel tools used elsewhere to punish them exist on Pio's farm. No one commits a serious crime there. For any small mistake, Pio gives only a kind and friendly scolding, so full of warmth that the guilty one ends up crying. Listen to this. Pio created a kind of contest among his people, allowing a certain number to earn their freedom each year. Can you believe they don't even care whether they live free or enslaved on his land? That this chance of freedom doesn't push them to act better? Yet, by their own will, they all behave in a way that deserves praise. My friend kept describing the farmer's virtues. My mind grew more and more sure that I was stepping into a novel. At last, he was ready to tell me the story of the crime I would learn about in just a few hours. I stopped him. "No," I told him, "let me hear everything directly from the accused himself. Then I will compare it with what you tell me." "That's better," he replied. "Giuliano is innocent." Innocent? Almost. My curiosity had reached its peak. The legal documents had not dulled my taste for stories, and I felt lucky to find, in the middle of all that dry judicial prose surrounding me, a subject truly worthy of a writer's pen. "Where is the jail?" I asked. "It's close," he answered, "but now it's almost night. Better rest. Tomorrow will do." I followed his advice. A fresh pot of coffee arrived. We drank it while recalling memories of the past. There were many. Together we had seen the first illusions bloom, and together we had watched the last ones fade away. There was enough to fill not just 1, but 100 nights. That evening passed quickly, even more so once the whole family joined our intimate conversation. Because of an exception I caused, bedtime was set to midnight. How sweet it is to have a friend, I thought, remembering Count Maestra, and then I went to the room they had prepared for me. Chapter 2. The next morning, while the first light of dawn was still breaking across the sky, I was already awake. A slave entered my room holding a large glass of fresh milk, drawn just minutes earlier. I drank it quickly in just a few gulps. I asked about my friend and the slave told me he was already up. I sent for him right away. "Is it too early to go to the jail?" I asked as soon as he appeared at the bedroom door. "Far too early," he replied. "Why the rush? We should enjoy the cool morning air instead. Let's take a ride. We can pass by Pio's farm." I liked the idea. I finished dressing and we both left. 2 mules were waiting for us at the gate, lively and eager to move. We mounted and rode off. 3 hours later, just as the sun had burned away the mist that covered the hills like wide blankets, we returned. I had seen the beautiful house and the impressive fields of old Pio's farm. That was our main topic over lunch. At last, after giving my body the rest it needed and getting the proper permission, I went to the jail to speak with the accused man, Giuliano. I sat in a room where only a little light came through the window and waited for the mysterious criminal. He didn't keep me waiting long. After about 15 minutes, he stood before me. 2 soldiers remained by the door. I told the prisoner to sit down. Before beginning the questioning, I spent a few moments, about 5 minutes, observing him closely. He was a brown-skinned man of average height, thin and physically weak. Yet his head and eyes showed great inner strength and courage. He had an air of innocence, but not the kind that is frightened or broken. Rather, he seemed proud of being imprisoned, facing human justice not with the boldness of a guilty man, but with the calm confidence of someone who believes in divine justice. Then I began to question him. First, I told him clearly that I was there to defend him. I urged him not to hide any part of what had happened leading to his arrest. And so, with a rare peace in his heart, he told me everything, the full story of his crime. Giuliano had been one of those people whose life had been changed by the kindness of Pio, who gave him food, shelter, and work. His good character, his gratitude, and the deep respect and love he felt for his benefactor were not left unrewarded. After some time, Pio gave Giuliano a small farm not far from the plantation, so that he could live there with his young daughter, whose mother had passed away after the events that led Giuliano to seek Pio's protection. The girl was 7 years old. Giuliano always said she was the most beautiful mulatto girl for miles around. Her name was Elisa, and she completed the sacred circle of Giuliano's love, along with Pio and the memory of her late mother. Hard-working by nature and necessity, Giuliano saw his efforts quickly bear fruit. But he never stopped pushing himself. He wanted to leave something behind for his daughter when he died. To die without ensuring her future was his greatest fear. Could he count on Pio living forever? Pio had a son, 3 years older than Elisa. The boy was kind and well-raised, brought up under his father's careful eye, who from an early age taught him the values that made Pio so deeply loved by everyone. Carlos and Elisa grew up almost always together, sharing that innocent bond of childhood that knows no difference in rank or background. They cared for each other very much, and both felt deep sadness when Carlos had to leave to begin his formal studies. Time passed, and with it came changes. Years later, when Carlos returned to the plantation, stepping down from his horse with a bachelor's degree in his pocket, it was as if a sponge had wiped away the past. Elisa was now a grown woman. She could finally understand the sacrifices her father had made for her, and she had placed all her heart's affection in a deep, respectful love for him. Carlos was now a man. He understood the rules of society, and from the very beginning, it was clear that a deep gap now separated the son of the protector from the daughter of the protected. The day Carlos returned was a joyful one at old Pios' farm. Giuliano joined in the general joy, just like everyone else rich or poor in the neighborhood. And this happiness was just as genuine for all of them. They all felt that the return of the farmer's son was a blessing for the whole community. Days passed and Pio still couldn't bring himself to send his son away to begin a career in politics, administration, or law. Still, he began to notice many changes in his boy compared to the young man who had left home years before. His ideas, feelings, and habits were no longer the same. Pio thought it might be the lingering effect of school life, and hoped that returning to the peaceful air of the countryside and seeing the simple life on the farm would help bring him back to his old self. What upset Pio most was that his college-educated son showed no interest in books. Carlos didn't seem to care about gaining new knowledge, which Pio believed was essential for the kind of life his son would soon lead. In truth, Carlos had only one focus and one pleasure: hunting. He spent days chasing animals through the forest, and all his attention, thoughts, and studies were devoted to that single pursuit. At noon, people could always count on seeing him arrive at Giuliano's house to rest a while. There, he would talk with Giuliano's daughter in a calm, friendly way. Giuliano would come home, exchange warm and respectful words with Pio's son, offer part of his humble lunch, which the young man rarely accepted, and then spend a meal chatting about hunting. Everything went on like this, without any real change. One day, when Giuliano came home for lunch, he noticed his daughter seemed sad. He looked closer and saw that her eyes were red from crying. He asked what was wrong. Elisa said she had a headache. But during the quiet meal, Giuliano saw her wiping away tears when she thought no one was looking. Elisa stood quiet. But after dinner he called her over and, in a gentle and caring tone, asked her to tell him what was wrong. After hesitating for a long time, she finally spoke. "My father," she began, "what I have to say is simple. Mr. Carlos, who has shown more interest in me lately than he did at first, told me today that he likes me. He said I should be his, that only he could give me everything I wanted. He said many other things, but I couldn't even hear them all. I was too shocked by his first words. I told him not to think such things," she went on. "But he kept pushing. I had to say no again. Then he got angry, gave me a harsh look, and walked away saying, 'You will be mine.'" Giuliano was stunned. He asked his daughter for every detail of the conversation. He had no doubt now Carlos had bad intentions. But how could such a good man have a son like that? And wasn't Carlos a better person before he went away? How could he confront his own son? And even if he could, how would he stop the threat? If he left the land where his father lived, wouldn't that seem like ingratitude? These thoughts raced through Giuliano's mind. He saw the edge of a deep hole and didn't know how to step back from it. At last, after comforting and calming his daughter, he stood up, made his decision, and left for the farm to find Carlos. He found him surrounded by some enslaved workers, supervising the cleaning of several hunting rifles. Julian greeted him warmly and asked to speak in private. Carlos flinched but had no choice but to agree. After stepping a short distance from the group, Carlos asked, "What do you want, Julian?" Julian replied, "Mr. Carlos, I'm asking you, in the name of your mother's soul, to leave my daughter in peace." "But what did I do?" Carlos stammered. "Oh, don't deny it. I know what happened." "What exactly do you know?" "I know about your conversation today. But what's done is done. I'll still be your friend, maybe even more so, if you leave my poor daughter alone, the daughter that God gave me." Carlos stood there quietly for a few moments. Then he spoke. "Enough," he said. "I admit it, Julia. It was a foolish mistake, and I regret it deeply. Go home in peace. I will respect your daughter as if she were already gone." Overcome with relief, Julian nearly fell to his knees and tried to kiss Carlos' hands. He hurried back to his house and told his daughter everything that had happened between him and the son of the town's most powerful man. Elisa, moved not only for herself but also for her father, felt truly grateful for this peaceful resolution. Everything seemed to return to how it was before. Carlos continued visiting, but always at times when Julian was present. To make things even safer, an elderly female relative had been invited by Julian to stay in the house. Her presence made any further attempt from Carlos almost impossible. One afternoon, about 15 days after their conversation, Julian returned from the farm of Old Pio. Night was falling quickly. He walked slowly, lost in thought, calculating what little he still needed to complete the small fortune he had promised for his daughter's future. So deep in thought was he that he didn't notice how dark it had become. When he finally looked up, he realized he was still quite far from home. He picked up his pace. As he neared the house, he heard muffled cries, weak but full of fear. He began to run toward the yard around the house. All the windows were shut, yet the cries grew louder and more desperate. A shadow passed in front of him and disappeared toward the back of the house. Julian wanted to chase it, but the screams were unmistakably those of his daughter. With a strength no one would expect from such a frail body, he managed to force open one of the windows and climbed inside. What he saw stunned him. The old relative he had asked to watch over the house lay on the floor, tied up, gagged, and clearly exhausted. A broken chair lay nearby, and others were scattered around in chaos. "My daughter," he cried out, and he rushed deeper into the house. There, Elisa struggled weakly in Carlos' arms, barely able to fight anymore. She had no hope left of escaping his grip. At the very moment Julian entered through one door, another man came in through the opposite side. A man, known in town for his shady past, often hired to do the dirtiest work. The figure was the same one that Julia had seen in the courtyard. And there were others too, who appeared at a signal from the first man just as Julia entered the place where the painful struggle between innocence and evil was taking place. Julia managed to pull Elisa away from Carlos' arms. Furious, he grabbed a chair and was about to throw it when the henchman, who had arrived by then, stopped him. Carlos quickly recovered from his shock at seeing Julia. Regaining his calm, he stared coldly at his unfortunate father and whispered, full of hate, "You'll pay for this." Then, turning to his men, he shouted, "Tie him up." Within 5 minutes they obeyed. Julian couldn't fight 5 men alone. Carlos left with 4 of his men. One stayed behind as a guard. Tears burst from Elisa's eyes like rain. Her heart broke seeing her father bound like that. It wasn't the danger she had escaped that upset her most. It was not being able to hug her father freely and happily. Why was he tied up? What did Carlos plan to do? Kill him? These dark and terrifying thoughts raced through Elisa's mind. Between sobs, she shared them with Julian. But Julian remained calm, cool, fearless. He comforted his daughter, telling her that Carlos could be many things, but never a murderer. They waited in anxious silence for a few minutes. Julian looked at his daughter and seemed lost in thought. After some time he asked, "Elisa, do you truly consider your dishonor to be a great misfortune?" "Oh, Father," she cried. "Answer me. If you had lost the purity given to you by heaven, would you consider yourself the unhappiest woman in the world?" "Yes, yes, Father." Julian fell silent. Elisa wept again. Then she turned toward the guard Carlos had left behind and tried to beg for mercy. Julian stopped her. "Ask for nothing," he said. "There is only one true protector for the unfortunate. It is God. There is another after him, but that one is far away. Father of us all, what son did the Lord give you?" Elisa returned to her father. "Come closer," he said. Elisa obeyed. Julian's arms were tied, but he could move his hands a little. He tried to caress Elisa, touching her cheeks and kissing her head. She leaned down and hid her face in her father's chest. The guard didn't notice what was happening. After a few minutes of holding each other, a sharp scream broke the silence. The guard ran toward them. Elisa had fallen completely, covered in blood. Julian had struggled to grab a hunting knife left by Carlos on a chair. As soon as he got it, he stabbed Elisa in the chest. When the guard rushed at him, it was too late to stop the second blow, with which Julian made the first wound deeper and deadly. Elisa rolled on the floor in her final convulsions. "Murderer!" shouted the guard. "Protector! I saved my daughter from shame." "My father," whispered the poor girl as she died. Julian turned toward the body and said, shedding 2 tears, just 2, but 2 streams bursting from the volcano of his soul, "Tell God, my daughter, that I sent you to him sooner to save you from dishonor." Then he closed his eyes and waited. It wasn't long before Carlos arrived, accompanied by a police officer and several soldiers. Leaving Julian's house, Carlos had the terrible idea to report to the authorities that the old farmer had tried to kill him, so he had to fight back and manage to tie him up. Carlos and the officers were shocked. They hadn't expected the scene that met their eyes. Julian was arrested. He didn't deny the crime. He only asked to tell the full story at the right time. The old relative was untied, gagged, and taken to Pius Farm. Giuliano told me his whole story, and now I'll tell you what he said. When he finished, he looked at me and asked, "Tell me, doctor, will you be my lawyer? Am I a criminal?" I answered, "I will be your lawyer." "Don't worry. I believe the judges will see that there were reasons to lessen your punishment." "Oh no," he replied, shaking his head. "That's not what scares me. Whether I am judged guilty or not means nothing to me. If the judges are not fathers themselves, they won't understand me. And if they don't understand, of course they will follow the law, thou shalt not kill. I know it is one of the commandments. I didn't want to hurt the poor man's soul by talking more about it. I said goodbye and told him I would return later. When I left the prison, my heart was heavy. What I just heard was not fiction, it was real tragedy. As I walked, things became clearer in my mind. My thoughts went back 23 centuries, and I could see something very much like Giuliano's case happening in ancient Rome. Everyone knows the sad story of Virginia. Writers like Livy and Diodorus Siculus wrote about it in detail. That tragedy helped bring down the rule of the 10 men who governed Rome unfairly. One of them, Appius Claudius, fell in love with Virginia, the daughter of a soldier named Virginius. Since he couldn't win her heart, Appius decided to take her by force. His plan was to make her his slave. He paid a false witness to go to court and claim that Virginia was his property. The father, unable to save his daughter through begging or threats, took out a butcher's knife and drove it into her chest. Not long after, the 10 men lost power, and the consulship was restored. In Giuliano's case, there were no 10 men to overthrow and no consuls to restore. But there was still something deeply wrong, a broken moral code and evil going unpunished. Sadly, the day when everyone turns away from such wickedness and truly respects what is right seems far off. Chapter 3. Walking through the late afternoon heat, I made my way toward the house of my friend, where I was staying. As I walked, a new idea came to me. I should go to Pio's farm. He was the one who had sent me the note asking me to come from the city, and surely he could tell me more about everything. You may remember that it was Pio, this old farmer, who had taken an interest in the accused man and was paying for his legal defense. There's no need for me to repeat how unusual and generous that was of him. It speaks for itself. The sun, even though it wasn't the hottest time of year, still beat down hard on a traveler like me. Going on foot would only make me tired and waste time. I decided to ride instead. When I got back to the house, I asked someone to prepare my horse. My host wasn't there, and I didn't want to wait for him. So, alone and without company, I rode out toward the farm. When I arrived, Pio was home. I told one of the workers to let him know that someone from the city wanted to speak with him. They brought me in right away. Inside, I found the old farmer talking quietly with a priest. Both Pio and the priest looked like they had spent their lives helping others. They seemed like two kind soldiers of faith, working together for good. Their hair was white, their eyes calm, their manners gentle but serious. When I entered, both stood up and greeted me warmly. At first, I focused most of my attention on Pio. I had heard so much about him from my friend and from Elisa's father, and now I could finally see him in person. For a few minutes, I watched him closely. Just by looking at him, I could sense what kind of man he was. He spoke softly and kindly, and told me that whatever I had to say, I could say it in front of the priest. "Hes like family," Pio added. "I have no secrets from him." Then he asked me, "Have you already spoken with Giuliano?" "Yes," I answered. "Then you already know the whole story?" "I know what he told me," I said. "And what he told you," Pio replied, is exactly what happened. It all aged me in just a few days. Heaven had saved this pain for the final years of my life. I learned something through suffering. And maybe it was better this way. If my son was going to wait for me to die before doing such things without consequences, then it was good he did it sooner. Crime came first, punishment followed. The word punishment struck me hard. I couldn't help myself, he had to ask. You mentioned punishment. Did you punish your son? Well then, who caused Elisa's death? Oh, not that, I said. He wasn't the one who killed her. No, but he was the reason it happened. Who forced that poor young girl into something she didn't want? It must have been my son. But what punishment are we talking about? Calm down, the old man replied, reading my curiosity. Carlos received an honorable kind of punishment, or rather, he got what should have been an honor turned into suffering. I know him well. All the comforts he grew up with, the education he earned through study, and yes, that pride we all inherit from our families came in larger measure than most. All of that is punishing him now, because everything I gave him was taken away by the life path I forced him to take. Carlos is now a soldier. A soldier! I exclaimed. It's true. He argued he already had a degree. I reminded him he should have remembered that when he entered Juliana's house. After much begging, I sent him south, under a firm promise and many warnings that as soon as he arrived, he would enlist in a regular army battalion. Isn't that a noble punishment? Let him serve his country and protect both land and honor for his fellow citizens. That's the best way to learn how to protect his own honor. We kept talking for nearly 2 hours. The old farmer looked deeply hurt every time we returned to Julian's case. After I told him I would personally handle the defense of the accused, he begged me not to hold back and do everything possible to reduce Julian's sentence. If it becomes necessary, he would say, to properly evaluate my son's actions, don't hold back, forget about me, because I have already forgotten my son. I greeted that Roman virtue, said goodbye to the priest, and left, after promising everything they had asked of me. Chapter 4. Then, did you speak to Julian? My friend asked when he saw me come into the house. I did, I replied. And I also spoke to the father of all. What a story, my friend. It feels like a dream. Didn't I tell you? And you're defending the accused? Without a doubt. I went to dinner and spent the rest of the evening talking about Julian's actions and the virtues of the farmer. A few days later, the jury was set to meet, and Julian had to appear. Of all the cases I had ever handled, this was the one that scared me the most, not because I doubted the mitigating circumstances of the crime, but because I feared I wasn't up to the task. The entire night before was one of true insomnia. Finally, the day of Julian's trial arrived. I woke up, ate little, and barely paid attention to what I was doing. I got dressed and was still lost in thought when my friend came into my room. "I'm going to hear you speak," he said, hugging me tightly. I confessed my fears to him, but his words of encouragement, though kind, barely reached me through my own worries. We left the house. I want to describe in detail everything that happened during the trial. The crime was proven by witness testimonies, and Julian never denied it. But despite the confession and the evidence, everyone in the courtroom audience, jurors, judge, and prosecutor watched the accused with eyes full of sympathy, admiration, and compassion. The prosecution simply summarized the witness accounts. When it came time to ask for the defendant's sentence, the prosecutor looked embarrassed, trembling and visibly moved. It was finally my turn to speak. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I know that the loudest signs of support broke through the silence of the room. When I finished, two men rushed into the courtroom and hugged me with emotion, the farmer and my friend. Julien was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The jurors had listened to the law and perhaps, just perhaps, also to their hearts. Chapter 5. Julien had finished serving his sentence when I sat down to write these pages. Now he lives on Pio's farm, not far from the old man himself. Pio didn't want him going back to the place where everything had gone wrong, so he offered him a home nearby. The farmer had gathered Elisa's ashes into an urn. Every week, both men go there to pray beside it. These two fathers, who watched their hopes buried along with their daughter, now share a deep bond formed by grief and shared sorrow. On the farm, people often speak of Elisa, but no one mentions Carlos. Pio is careful not to bring him up in front of Julien. He knows that name still cuts like a knife, the name of the man who led Julien to kill his own child. As for Carlos, he tries to live in a way that might somehow make up for what he did. He can never undo the harm he caused to an innocent young woman, or to the hearts of her parents. But every day, he tries to carry that guilt a little lighter, hoping time might soften the weight he bears.
Thank you for listening so far. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like our channel and click the bell to be notified whenever a new book is read. Have you heard of Machado de Assis? Machado de Assis, born in Rio de Janeiro in 1839, is considered one of the greatest writers in Brazilian literature and a master of psychological realism. He was a novelist, poet, playwright, and short story writer whose works explore the complexities of human behavior with irony, subtlety, and deep introspection. Among his most famous novels are Dom Casmurro, which questions truth and memory, and the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas, a satirical narrative told by a deceased man. Machado's literature often reflects the contradictions of Brazilian society, addressing issues like race, class, power, and identity in a sophisticated yet accessible style. Despite being born into poverty and facing racial prejudice, Machado de Assis rose to become the president of the Brazilian Academy of Letters and a symbol of literary excellence. His sharp wit and profound observations about society and the human soul make his works timeless and universally relevant. Today, he is recognized not only as a Brazilian icon, but also as a world-class author whose legacy continues to influence generations of writers and thinkers. Machado de Assis shows us that literature can be both elegant and critical, intimate and universal, humorous and profound. His stories remain as powerful and thought-provoking today as they were more than a century ago. Machado is a treasure of world literature, and through his voice, we discovered the infinite layers of the human experience.